Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Astro Bot Origins, the video series which covers the origins of every VIP bot in Astro Bot. After last episode's coverage of all the characters found within the Gorilla Nebula, we'll be moving on to the second world, the Tentacle System. So let's stop wasting time and dive straight into things. Just before we go all in, let's quickly stop at the crash site, as with a new area open, we have more bots to save. Specifically, in addition to a handful of generic bots, there's also some egg-shaped capsules which contain VIP bots based on animal characters, whose designs aren't really compatible with the typical bipedal bot look. There's no real set path to how you get these, so we'll cover them in their franchise's release orders. For our first series represented this way, we have Spyro the Dragon, the initial claim to fame for its original developer, Insomniac Games, who prior only had one game under their belt with Disruptor, an FPS released in 1996 for the PS1, which, despite garnering critical acclaim, was also a commercial failure. Despite this, the publisher, Universal Interactive Studios, decided to stick with them, with the team at Insomniac eventually deciding to take the concept for a game with a dragon in the lead role, inspired by the film Dragonheart, and tweaking it to capitalize on the then untapped demographic for the PlayStation, the family market, which at the time was being dominated by Nintendo, with the gameplay specifically taking heavy inspiration from the then newly released Super Mario 64. The final game would release in 1998 as Spyro the Dragon, it seeing the titular purple dragon alongside his dragonfly friend Sparx having to save the Dragon Kingdom from Nasty Nork by freeing the dragons that had been trapped within Crystal, collecting treasure gems and recovering dragon eggs across the 5 homeworlds, each of which housed 3 realms, a flight level and a boss fight. Whilst launch sales were initially slow, by the time the holiday season rolled around, Spyro proved to be a big hit for the system, garnering praise for its graphics and animations, great performance in spite of the large levels and worlds, gameplay which expanded on Mario's groundwork with maneuvers like the charge and glide, and its soundtrack composed and produced by former drummer of the Police, Stuart Copeland, the title managing to sell 5 million copies, making it the system's 18th best-selling game, with Spyro himself being widely considered to be the one character that could legitimately compete with the previously discussed Crash Bandicoot as the PS1's mascot, all of which led to Universal quickly greenlighting 2 sequels with 1999's Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage and 2000's Spyro Year of the Dragon. Similar to the history of Crash, Insomniac would decide to leave the series after 3 games due to a desire to work on something else, with Universal retaining the rights to the series, it going through multiple developers for multi-platform follow-ups, various handheld releases, and a more combat-oriented reboot with the Legend of Spyro trilogy, none of which ever saw the same level of success as the original trilogy by Insomniac, with the rights to the series ultimately ending up in the hands of Activision, which eventually led to Spyro taking an extended hiatus through most of the 2010s, only showing up as a recurring character in the Skylanders series. And whilst there was a brief return in 2018 with the Spyro Reignited trilogy, a collection of remakes of the first 3 games made by Toys for Bob, unlike the Crash Insane trilogy, which led to a full-scale revival of the series, nothing really happened with Spyro afterwards outside of crossover appearances in future Crash games, despite Reignited selling at least 10 million copies. Given his stance as a PS1 icon, it shouldn't be surprising to learn that there's a bot based on Spyro, which is named Fiery Artisan, his name being a reference to his first homeworld in Spyro 1, the Artisans, with his look being based on his original design from the Insomniac games, with attacking the bot prompting him to fight back with his fire breath, which has served as one of Spyro's 2 main methods of attacking in the majority of the games he's in. For our next animal bot, we have another third-party series with with 2006's Ōkami, arguably the most well-known game to come from Capcom's short-lived Clover studio, a development team formed of already existing talent at the company that desired more creative freedom, the game being a Zelda-inspired action-adventure title which initially released as a PlayStation 2 exclusive, in actually being one of the last big releases for the system before the launch of the PS3, being set in a fictional version of classical Japan inspired by the country's mythology and folklore, with the story seeing the Shinto sun goddess Amaterasu being awoken from a deep slumber after the land is cursed and has its life stolen from it following the release of the 8-headed demon Orochi. Despite being a critical darling on release for its cel-shaded art style and its main gameplay gimmick of the celestial brush, allowing you to combat enemies and solve puzzles by drawing out certain symbols, Ōkami was a financial failure on release, with the underperformance of both it and the game Clover released afterwards, God Hand, often being cited as the main reasons why the studio eventually closed, with most of its top talent like Atsushi Inaba, Shinji Mikami, and Hideki Kamiya all leaving to form what would eventually become Platinum Games. As for Ōkami, whilst managing to retain a cult audience, it mostly went dormant, getting a Wii port in 2008, a spiritual continuation with 2010's Ōkami Den for the DS, and a HD remaster on PS3 in 2012, which was later brought over to the PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC. But that seems to have changed recently, as a full-blown proper sequel to Ōkami was announced at the 2024 Game Awards, which will be made primarily by the brand new independent studio Clovers, which was formed following Hideki Kamiya's exit from Platinum in 2023, returning to his original role as the game's director. As for the bot pulled from the series, we have Celestial Painter, who's based on the main protagonist, Amaterasu, who as mentioned earlier is based on the Japanese goddess of the same name, taking the appearance of a white wolf based on a double entendre of the word Ōkami potentially meaning either great god or wolf, depending on how it's written, with the only people capable of seeing her as more than just a regular wolf being the player, other mythological figures, and practitioners of Shintoism. Within the crash site, she can be found sat in front of a tiny torii gate, with an incredibly small glowing green bot jumping around them, who's meant to be a stand-in for Isun, an inch-tall traveling artist who serves as Amaterasu's traveling companion, mostly providing comic relief and commenting on the game's events. In addition, by attacking the bot, it will run in a circle, leaving behind a trail of flowers, causing a large burst of plants to jump out before howling. This being directly based on how Amaterasu's footsteps create plants, which are more outgrown the faster they run, with defeated enemies exploding into flowers. The final animal bot we'll be looking at is pulled from the game Dreams, a game creation title released as a PS4 exclusive that was made by the England-based studio Media Molecule, which coincidentally was both one of the first PlayStation 4 titles to be shown, getting a small showcase at the system's reveal in February 2013, and would end up being one of the last Sony published titles for the system before the launch of the PS5, coming out in February 2020. The game allowing you to use its various tools to create rudimentary games, referred to as dreams, that could then be posted online for other people to play and vice versa, with there even being community jam events where people would make games based on a specific theme. Dreams would end up getting positive reviews and was later updated to include VR support, but despite building a fairly loyal community, it was announced that support for the game would be dropped in September 2023, along with a planned update for online multiplayer getting cancelled. Though despite development ceasing on the title, it still has a fairly active player base, with any player-created content for the game still being up and ready for anyone to play. As for the bot featured, we have Creative Cursor, who's based on an imp. The customizable creatures, who as the name suggests, serve as the game's cursor, being controlled with either the analog sticks or motion controls via a DualShock 4 or Move controller, with it being possible to find them in the crash site making a bot out of cubes, which can be destroyed by attacking it, prompting the imp to rebuild it. With that all out of the way, let's get into the first level of the Tentacle System, Go-Go Archipelago, which features 2 bots pulled from the 2001 PlayStation 2 title, Ico, an action-adventure game made by a team within PlayStation's Japan studio, led by one Fumito Ueda, whose only previous credits were animation work on 2 horror titles. The core idea for the game being to tell a boy meets girl story in which the 2 characters would hold each other's hands throughout the adventure, showcasing the bond between them without them being able to communicate. The idea coming from a commercial Ueda happened to watch of a woman holding a child's hand as they walk through the woods, with other inspirations including the original Prince of Persia, Another World, and the manga series Galaxy Express 999. The final game sees you play as a horned boy who, alongside a girl that speaks a fictional language, have to work together in order to escape an abandoned castle, the girl having the power to help navigate through the building due to being magically linked to it, but owing to being physically incapable of defending herself is dependent on you to protect her from monsters and guide her through the castle. Whilst Ico underperformed sales-wise, reportedly only shifting around 700,000 copies after 8 years, the game's cultural impact cannot be understated, as in addition to receiving rave reviews from critics who mainly highlighted its stellar presentation and how it offered a gaming experience unlike anything else on the market, the title has also served as a source of inspiration for all kinds of games and developers across the industry, both it and Team Ico kind of being the video game version of your favorite musician's favorite artist, with it often being one of the main works cited in the long-standing discussion of whether or not video games can be considered an art form. So given that legacy, it shouldn't be too surprising that Ico, as well as 2 other games the same team made for PlayStation, all have VIP bots pulled from them. The first bot to be taken from the game is Elfin Prisoner, who's based on the game's non-playable main character, Yorda, an elfin girl with magical ties to the castle who Ico frees from a cage and helps protect from the shadow monsters, in exchange for utilizing her powers to help them progress, the girl being entirely controlled by AI, with completing the game unlocking a cooperative 2-player mode. The bot comes with the accessory Uncomfortable Couch, which is meant to be one of the stone sofas which function as the game's save points, with the bot having the behavior of slowly following a dove, matching how Yorda's AI is programmed to do the same thing if you go idle, with attacking it causing the bot to briefly be overtaken by shadows. The other bot, named Horned Protector, is based on the game's other main character, the titular Ico, a young boy with bull horns growing out from his head who was brought to the castle to be sacrificed within a stone coffin, only escaping when an earthquake causes it to topple over, the boy being capable of both basic platforming and fighting off the shadow monsters that attack him, as he tries to find a way to escape alongside Yorda. The bot features the accessory Beachside Snack, which is a slice of watermelon, referencing a hidden ending where he eats some on a beach, with attacking it causing the bot to panic to grab the melon, only for one of its horns to fall off. Taking Go-Go Archipelago's secret exit, we now move on to the Lost Galaxy level, Lightbulb Limbo, which pulls characters from 2 action games with gothic inspirations, the first being Devil May Cry, a series of hack-and-slash titles made by Capcom, whose first entry actually started life as a concept for Resident Evil 4, before eventually shifting into an original title due to its fast-paced combat being at odds with Resi's survival horror aspects, along with the story and world being changed to one loosely inspired by the Italian epic poem The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. The final game would release in 2001 as an exclusive for the PlayStation 2, it following the journey of Dante, the half-human son of Sparta that runs a demon hunting business called Devil May Cry, being hired by a mysterious woman named Trish to stop Mundus, the demon emperor responsible for killing Dante Dante's mother and brother after he escaped his centuries-long imprisonment and plans to cross over into the human world via a castle on Mallet Island. Devil May Cry would prove to be a massive success, garnering critical acclaim for both its innovations in the action genre and stellar presentation, in addition to managing to sell 2.16 million copies, with the title often being cited as the one to invent the character action subgenre of hack and slash games, with the series going on to receive 4 sequels, a reboot, and various adaptations into other mediums, the franchise as a whole standing as one of Capcom's most beloved and best-selling series. The bot pulled from the franchise is Son of Sparda, who's based on Devil May Cry's main protagonist, Dante, who in turn is named after both the main protagonist and author of the Divine Comedy, with his personality being based on the titular main protagonist of the manga series, Cobra, the series seeing him do battle with monsters such as the Demon Emperor Mundus, Argosax the Chaos, and his own brother, Virgil, with the bot's design specifically being based on his look in the first game. When given its accessory of the Anti-Demon Kit, it can be found juggling a clown enemy with a pair of handguns, with attacking the bot causing it to drop its combo before starting it back up again with a series of sword slashes. This being an homage to the juggling system, which is one of the core appeals of DMC's combat, the clown being a stand-in for the marionette enemies, which were the most common and first regular enemy type you encounter in Devil May Cry 1, with the weapons being the same ones Dante starts the first game with, both of which would go on to be a regular part of his kit in every following entry, with the pistols being stand-ins for Ebony and Ivory, whilst the sword is based on Force Edge, which in addition to being a starting weapon can later be awoken into a stronger blade named after his father, Sparda. The other series featured in the level is Legacy of Kain, which got its start in 1996 with Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, which initially released as a PS1 exclusive before getting a PC port a year later. The title being the first landmark release of developer Silicon Knights, with Crystal Dynamics serving as the publisher. The game follows the titular Kain as he sets out on a quest to cure his vampirism and get revenge on the people who originally killed him, by traveling across the land of Nosgoth to slay a corrupt oligarchy of sorcerers called the Circle of Nine, with his journey seeing him transition into more of an anti-hero role as he comes to embrace his vampiric curse and his actions cause the world to shift into a barren wasteland. The title would receive praise for the ambition the game was showcasing in terms of narrative and presentation, along with the stellar voice performances, though there was also some negativity towards its technical holdbacks like the graphics, long loading times, and the actual gameplay, with it reportedly selling well, though exact sales figures are hard to come by. Naturally, this would lead to multiple sequels, but due to a legal battle over who actually owned the IP, Silicon Knights would have no involvement with future entries, with Crystal Dynamics taking on development duties, whilst the role of publisher was handed over to their then parent company, Eidos Interactive. The next entry being 1999's Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which initially released for the PlayStation and was shortly followed by ports for both PC and the Sega Dreamcast, with this title not only seeing a gameplay shift from the top-down Zelda-like style of Blood Omens to a Tomb Raider-inspired 3D game with hack-and-slash combat, but also saw you play as the brand new character Raziel, a former vampire lieutenant who, after being executed by Kain, seeks to get revenge against him after being revived as a wraith, with Soul Reaver once again getting praise for its story and presentation, and managed to sell 1.5 million copies by 2001. The series would see 3 more releases, with direct sequels to both Soul Reaver and Blood Omens in 2001 and 2002 respectively, as well as 2003's Legacy of Kain Defiance, which had you play as both Kain and Raziel, along with the gameplay shifting to a DMC-like hack and slash. But nearly every attempt to try and continue the series afterwards ultimately went nowhere, until over 2 decades later, when in 2020 2024, both Soul Reaver games received remasters courtesy of Aspyr, with both a remaster of Defiance and a brand new mainline entry with Legacy of Kain Ascendance, which will see another genre shift to a 2D action game, being set to release in 2026. Two bots are pulled from the series, the first being Vampchamp, who's based on Kain, the protagonist of Blood Omen and antagonist of Soul Reaver, originally a human noble that was murdered by a group of assassins and resurrected as a vampire by the necromancer Mortanius, the character being consistently portrayed as an anti-hero, a lot of his early characterization being inspired by Clint Eastwood's character of Will Money from the 1992 western Unforgiven, the team wanting to explore the idea of what it means to be evil, with later entries taking inspiration from the story of Oedipus, the Greek myth of a tragic hero whose attempts to avoid a prophecy ends with him accidentally fulfilling it. He comes with the accessory Thirsty Cutlass, which consists of Kain's signature weapon, the Soul Reaver, along with various glasses of grape juice, which serves as a stand-in for either alcohol, referencing the opening scene of Blood Omen, where he tries to get a drink from a tavern, or blood, matching the original game's bad ending where he drinks a chalice of it. Finally, by attacking the bot, he'll split into a flock of bats, which is one of his vampiric powers from the games. The other bot taken is Resurrected Wraith, which is based on Raziel, the main protagonist of the Soul Reaver games, who was originally a vampire that served as Kain's lieutenant and right-hand man until he evolved to the point of surpassing Kain, leading his master to execute him, afterwards being revived by the Elder God as a wraith with the goal of killing Kain, his actions having caused the cycle of reincarnation to cease due to most of the living population being immortal vampires, and in turn caused Nosgoth to be on the brink of ecological collapse. The bot can be found in the crash site perched on a rock, recreating Soul Reaver's cover art, with attacking it causing it to mimic Raziel's ability to shift between the material and spectral realms, complete with the blue filter that covers the spectral realm. Returning to the Tentacle System, we have the level Downsize Surprise, which, to match the stage's gimmick of the shrinking mouse transformation, features two bots based on characters that are very small. The first one is taken from the Katamari series, a lineup of action puzzle games developed by Namco that has been going since 2004 with Katamari Damacy, which was released in both Japan and America as an exclusive for the PlayStation 2. The series' creation being credited to artist Keita Takahashi, who had the desire to make something unlike anything else on the market, which could only be done as a video game. The first entry tasking you with exploring small levels, rolling up as many objects as you can on a Katamari ball, but the bigger the ball gets, the larger objects you can pick up with it, the end goal being to create enough Katamaris to create new stars, a new moon for Earth, and various other cosmic bodies after they were accidentally destroyed by the King of all Cosmos. The title did fairly well in Japan, and despite fears of it being too weird for Western markets, which is also the reason why the game didn't get a European release, it still managed to garner a cult audience in America, with it overall being a surprise hit that reportedly sold out constantly across stores due to retailers underestimating how many people would be interested in such a quirky title. The success of which led to Katamari quickly becoming a franchise with multiple sequels, most of which were exclusive to PlayStation, and several mobile spin-offs. Some of the most recent releases being remasters of both Damacy and its first sequel, We Love Katamari, in 2018 and 2023 respectively, as well as 2025's Once Upon a Katamari, which is the first wholly original console entry for the series since 2011's Touch My Katamari, all three of which are available across all modern platforms. As for the bot pulled from the series, we have Royal Roller, who's based on the series' main protagonist, the Prince, the 5-centimeter tall son of the King of all Cosmos, who alongside his many cousins is entrusted with rolling the Katamaris throughout the series, with one of these Katamaris appearing as an accessory, referred to as the Rolling Star, in reference to one of the songs from the original game, Lonely Rolling Star, with attacking the bot causing it to start rolling the ball in a circle, which you can get stuck to if you get in its way. The other bot featured in the level is taken from Moss, a VR adventure game that initially released in 2018 as a PS4 exclusive for use with the PlayStation VR accessory, and was the debut release of Polyarch, a studio based in Seattle, Washington, founded by a mix of former Bungie and Rockstar employees, which specializes in making virtual reality games. The title has you play from the perspective of a reader that gets brought into the world of a magic book, helping guide the story's protagonist, a young mouse named Quill, on a journey to rescue her uncle from the fire-breathing snake Sarfog, the player getting to control both her and a glowing orb to interact with the environments. Moss would receive heavy critical praise, with it even being nominated at several award shows for Best VR Game, with the title receiving ports for PC, Oculus Quest, and PlayStation 5, along with getting a sequel in 2022, which similarly would initially launch on PS4 before later getting brought over to the MetaQuest 2, PC, and PS5, both games serving as standout titles amongst PlayStation's VR library. As for the VIP bot pulled from the game, we have Intrepid Rodent, who's based on the series' main protagonist, Quill, who in addition to being able to fight off enemies with a small sword, she's also aware of the player's presence and can communicate with them through American Sign Language, to give hints for puzzle solutions and emotional responses. In addition, the bot has the accessory Jade Blade and Storybook, these being the character's sword, which they use to battle enemies, and the storybook in which the game takes place, with a butterfly flying over their head, referencing the one that travels across the opening pages of the book during the game's intro. Taking Downsize Surprise's secret exit, we have the Lost Galaxy level Boxel Bust Up, which to match the stage's retro theming features some of the more obscure characters that originate from the PS1 era. Now the first of these, which might confuse you based on the character theme used for the level, made their video game debut in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, a crossover platform fighter released in 2012 for the PlayStation 3. Which was primarily developed by and was the debut release of Superbot Entertainment. The title widely being viewed as Sony's attempt at trying to do their own version of Super Smash Bros. The game featuring various characters from the company's then almost 20-year history coming together to beat the ever-loving hell out of each other. The initial trailer for the game featuring icons like God of War's Kratos, Twisted Metal's Sweet Tooth, Sly Cooper, Parappa the Rapper, and Uncharted's Nathan Drake, with the title differentiating itself from Smash through its changes to the gameplay, the main one being that instead of KOing opponents by racking up damage to launch them off screen, you instead build up a meter to perform a super move which insta-kills anyone caught by it, each character having 3 levels of supers that progressively become harder to dodge and more cinematic. Despite their best efforts though, PlayStation All-Stars was met with a mostly average reception, people appreciating some aspects of the game, such as the full voice acting for every character, everyone on the roster having a rivalry with another fighter, and the main mechanic for stage hazards having the various game worlds being invaded by characters from other series, ranging from Parappa Town being attacked by a Mauler from Killzone to Hades being taken over by an army of Patapons, but it was also hit with criticism due to a mixed reaction to some of the gameplay changes made from its competitors. The game's roster, which for every good, or at least reasonable pick, had just as many that left people confused as to how they got in, along with some very obvious choices that were noticeably absent, and the game overall just not having the same level of content games like Super Smash Bros. Had to offer, both in terms of stuff to do and the amount of characters to play as. The end result of this being that despite reportedly selling around 1 million copies by June of 2013, Sony didn't see it as enough of a success to warrant either a sequel or more DLC releases beyond 4 additional characters and 2 stages, with them also cutting ties with Superbot, who would go defunct in 2014, their only other release being the educational mobile game Cuddlefish Friends. Though this hasn't stopped the game garnering a small cult audience, along with interest in online circles as to what an All-Stars 2 could look like if it was given a similar budget and development time to later Smash games. As for the character pulled from the title, we have the VIP bot Forgotten Mascot, who's based on Polygon Man. The end boss for PlayStation All-Stars' Arcade Mode, in turn serving as the game's equivalent to Master Hand. However, unlike Master Hand, who was a wholly original character created for Smash, Polygon Man is actually an early rejected mascot for the original PlayStation that was created by the American branch of Sony following a poor reaction from test audiences to the PlayStation name, though the furthest the character ever got was appearing on flyers at the 1995 E3 show, after the Japanese side of Sony, specifically the then global head of the PlayStation brand, Ken Kutaragi, had an overt negative reaction to him due to a mix of both the company's distaste for the brand being represented by a singular mascot and the fact he was colored with flat shading as opposed to the garage shading used by the actual console, hence the bot's name of Forgotten Mascot and why he fits the level theme despite technically debuting in a PS3 game, with attacking the bot in the crash site causing it to break apart and reform itself out of various purple geometric shapes, matching his intro and defeat cutscenes from All-Stars. The next VIP bot is pulled from IQ Intelligent Cube, or Kurushi in Power Regions, a series of puzzle games made by developer G Artists, later known as Epix, whose first entry released in 1997 as a PS1 exclusive. The game tasking you with removing a series of regular grey and advantage green cubes rolling towards you by placing down marks and deactivating them once the blocks roll over it, whilst making sure not to erase and avoid the forbidden black cubes, losing if your character is pushed off the stage by the blocks, with the stage shrinking if you let too many regular or advantage cubes roll off the end of the stage or capture a forbidden cube. Whilst the game did get some flack for its lack of simultaneous multiplayer, the title instead having 2 players take turns, as well as some graphical and performance issues, Intelligent Cube ended up being mostly liked by audiences, selling over 750,000 copies by the end of the year, with it later receiving 3 sequels, with 1998's IQ Final, or Kurushi Final Mental Blocks in Europe, also on the PS1, 2000's IQ Remix Plus for the PS2, and 2006's IQ Mania for the PSP, all of which didn't release in America, and the latter 2 remain Japan exclusives. As for the bot pulled from the series, we have Puzzle Cube, who's basically a regular bot that's head has been swapped with the cube platforms from the game, with its accessory Cube Quasher adding the human character you control on top of its head, with the bot using a PS1 controller to move him and erase the cubes that roll towards the end, making this the only bot who isn't representing a specific character, and instead is just the actual game they're based on, with attacking it causing some of the cubes and the human to fall off its head, which the bot then throws back up. The final bot for this level is taken from Vib-Ribbon, a rhythm game which released in 1999 and was made by Nana Onsha, the same studio behind the Parappa the Rapper series. The game requiring you to press the correct buttons at the right time to help guide the rabbit Vibri through various obstacles, with their timings being based on the beat of the song. The title featuring 6 tracks composed by the J-pop band Laugh & Peace. And thanks to the entire game being able to load onto the PlayStation's memory pool after the disc is first read, owing to its use of minimalistic vector graphics, you can also create a near infinite number of automatically generated custom levels by swapping the game disc with any music CD. The game overall was very positively received by critics, mainly praising its vector wireframe art style, with it managing to sell 100,000 copies during its launch week in Japan, and has since garnered a cult audience, with it eventually getting 2 follow-ups on the PlayStation 2 with 2003's Vib-Ribbon and 2004's Vib-Ripple, though unlike the first game which did get a European release, both of these later installments installments came out as Japan exclusives. As for the bot taken, we have Ribbon Rider, who's based on the game's main character, Vib-Ribbon, who as mentioned earlier takes the form of a rabbit, but after taking enough hits can end up turning into a frog and insect, with the player needing to press the right button to help her run through loops, jump over blocks, roll over waves, and step over pits, with the later stages combining two of these hazards together, requiring you press both matching buttons, with her also singing a congratulatory song if the player manages to get a high score. When paired with its accessory Data Circles, it can be spotted skipping in front of a small screen of a loop from the game, with attacking the bot causing it to perform one of Vib-Ribbon's animations for clearing the obstacles. Moving on, we've got the level Trunk of Funk, which features characters from two games which revolve around their protagonists having to deal with hordes of creatures associated with the dead. The first of these being Days Gone, an open-world zombie survival game made by PlayStation's Bend Studio, which initially released in 2019 for the PlayStation 4. The title taking place in Oregon 2 years into a pandemic which turned humans into zombie-like feral creatures called Freakers. The game overall taking heavy inspiration from works like World War Z, The Walking Dead, and Sons of Anarchy, with one of the main selling points of the title being the size of the enemy hordes you could be expected to deal with, ranging from 25 to 500 individual swarmers. Upon release, Days Gone was hit with a mostly mixed reaction, garnering praise for its presentation, enemy AI, and voice performances, but also faced some criticism for its story, technical glitches, and the open world not having enough content to offer for some. With this mixed reaction and its lengthy development cycle of approximately 6 years, often being cited as why Sony turned down a pitch for a sequel, though this didn't stop the game from being nominated for several awards, along with later receiving a PC port in 2021, as well as a PS5 remaster in 2025, with it having sold at least 7.32 million copies as of February 2022. As for its appearance in Astro Bot, we have Brave Biker, who's modeled after Days Gone's main protagonist, Deacon St. John, an outlaw biker turned mercenary who goes on a journey to find his presumed dead wife, Sarah Whitaker, after finding out information suggesting she may still be alive. Along the way, having various run-ins with hordes of freakers, a gang of cultists called the Rippers, and various other survivors based in the Pacific Northwest, with the bot also getting an accessory called Deek's Drifter, this being Deacon's customizable drifter bike which serves as your main method of transportation around the open world, which you can push over by attacking it. The other bot is taken from Kenna Bridge of Spirits, an action-adventure game made by independent studio Ember Lab, the title being the developer's first game after starting as a company that made commercials and branded applications, a deal with Sony allowing the studio to expand to a 15-developer team in exchange for console exclusivity, the game releasing in 2021 for PS4, PS5, and PC. It follows a young spirit guy named Kenna helping the trapped spirits of an abandoned village overcome their trauma and move on to the spirit world, in order to get passage to a sacred mountain shrine, having to solve puzzles and battle against monsters created by a powerful mass spirit, using a mix of both her magical staff, which can also be used as a bow and arrow or create protective shields, and small spirit companions referred to as the Rot, which can be gathered to move objects, take certain shapes, or assist in combat. The title was met with generally positive reviews from critics, particularly praising the game's art style and animations, and how the game utilized the Rot, the creatures often being compared to Nintendo's Pikmin, both in terms of design and how they're used in gameplay, albeit with some division over the story and moment-to-moment gameplay. And whilst exact sales figures aren't known, it reportedly sold enough to break even within its first month on the market, and frequently placed highly on the PlayStation Store's American and European charts, leading to the game getting a port for both Xbox One and Series consoles in 2024, with 2026 being set to see the game come to the Nintendo Switch 2, in addition to a sequel titled Kenna Scars of Cosmora, which is currently confirmed for both PlayStation 5 and PC. The VIP bot taken, Spirit Guide, is based on the game's titular main protagonist, Kenna, who became a spirit guide following the footsteps of her father, the game seeing her fulfill her duty by helping the spirits of the abandoned village move on from the afterlife, per the request of the village's former elder, Zajiro, along the way learning how to utilize her staff's powers and the origin of the rot. After being given an accessory based on her staff, named Shape-Shifting Staff in-game, they can be found meditating as a rot jumps around trying to get her attention, with attacking the bot causing it to drop a large number of rots before picking them back up. Our last regular level of the day is Wormy Passage, which exclusively pulls its VIP bots from The Last of Us, a duology of third-person action games made by Naughty Dog, whose first entry released in 2013 for the PlayStation 3. Set in a post-apocalyptic America after a widespread fungal infection turns people into raging cannibals, it follows smuggler Joel Miller as he escorts a young girl named Ellie across the country for a rebel militia called the Fireflies, her seeming immunity to the infection leading them to believe they can use her to find a cure, the gameplay having you utilize a mix of weapons and stealth to take down any enemies that pose a threat to both you and Ellie. One of the designers, Richard Cambier, stating they wanted to combine the character building and interaction of Ico with the tension and action of Resident Evil 4. Upon its release, The Last of Us was an immediate critical darling, often being cited by reviewers as not just the best PS3 exclusive, but the best game Naughty Dog had ever made, getting overwhelming praise for its story, characters, and presentation. And whilst it wasn't the final game for the system, or even the last Sony published game for it, it's often viewed as being the system's swan song as the final big release for the console before the launch of the PlayStation 4, with it overall selling 8.4 million copies, making it the fourth best-selling PS3 game, only being outdone by GTA 5, Gran Turismo 5, and Uncharted 3. Naturally, given this success, it didn't take long for more stuff to come out based on the title, where after a DLC expansion was released in early 2014, titled The Last of Us Left Behind, the PS4 would get both a remaster of the first game, also in 2014, and a full-blown sequel in 2020 with The Last of Us Part 2, with both games then getting a remake and remaster respectively on both PS5 and PC in 2022 and 24, all alongside a TV show adaptation by HBO, which currently consists of 2 seasons, with a third being expected to air in 2027. Whilst the franchise has consistently managed to maintain its critical praise, the reaction amongst general audiences did become more split following the release of the first game, mostly due to a mix of some of the writing choices made in Part 2, which were also present during the second season of the TV show, as well as the PS5 versions of both games being viewed as generally pointless due to them not really doing enough to justify their existence or price tag, especially when there was nothing wrong with the PS4 versions that were already playable on the system, leading to an overall feeling that the series as a whole, whilst not necessarily bad, isn't quite the magnum opus masterpiece that a lot of game critics were making it out to be. Though it's also worth noting that this more mixed reaction hasn't stopped the series from maintaining its incredibly strong sales and status as one of PlayStation's most iconic franchises. For our first character pulled from the series, we have Immune Survivor, who's based on Ellie Williams, a young girl who's immune to the cordyceps brain infection that's turning people into hyper-aggressive monsters, leading the Fireflies to believe they can use her to create a vaccine to save humanity, with the amount of people she's lost and seen die leading her to develop severe monophobia and survivor's guilt, her journey with Joel eventually leading the two to build a strong father-daughter-like bond with each other, with Ellie going on to serve as the main protagonist for both the prequel expansion Left Behind, as well as The Last of Us Part 2. This bot comes with the accessory Survival Kit, which in addition to featuring a backpack, which is used by the game's leads to store the various weapons, crafting items and tools they find during their journey, also comes with a bow and arrow, a long gun with an arcing trajectory, which is also the weapon most associated with Ellie, the bot being found in the crash site carrying Thea behind cover, with attacking them prompting them to fire an arrow in retaliation. Next up we have Dependable Smuggler, who's based off of the first game's main protagonist, Joel, a man who was living in Austin, Texas when the outbreak happened, and was left traumatized when during his attempt to escape, he lost his 12-year-old daughter Sarah to a soldier, the rest of the game seeing him 20 years later, now working as a smuggler in Boston's quarantine zone, being given a job by Marlene, the leader of a rebel militia group called the Fireflies, to transport Ellie to a drop-off zone in Colorado. The years he spent surviving against all odds making him more than capable of fighting off the hordes or anyone that gets in his way. The bot has the accessory Travel Bag and Distracting Masonry, these being Joel's backpack and a brick, which can be used as either a melee weapon that kills most enemies within 3 hits, or can be thrown to either distract or stun them, with him being found crouching by a bit of debris getting ready to throw it, likely being a nod to the game's cover system. The final bot featured is Fungus Head, who's meant to be a stand-in for one of the infected, people who have been taken over by the cordyceps brain infection that causes them to instinctively attack any non-infected animal or person on sight, the disease being directly inspired by a real-life fungus that takes over the bodies of ants, with the bot specifically being based on the 3rd stage of the infection referred to as clickers, where after a year of being infected, the fungus has grown and scarred the victim's face almost entirely, better shielding the brain at the cost of leaving them completely blind, forcing them to rely on a crude form of echolocation by making croaking and clicking noises, hence their nickname. The bot can be found hunched over, imitating how the clickers behave when trying to find someone, with attacking the bot causing the mushrooms to fall off of its head, prompting it to grow some new ones. After taking down Wako Tako, who was also the second boss of Astro Bot Rescue Mission, the crossover level of the world unlocks, named Bot of War, which is based on the God of War series, a lineup of action games made by PlayStation's Santa Monica studio that got its start in 2005 on the PlayStation 2, the first game following Kratos, a Spartan warrior turned servant to the Greek gods, being tasked with slaying Ares, the god of war, after he launched an attack on the city of Athens, with Kratos ultimately proving victorious, utilizing the power held within Pandora's box and being crowned the new God of War by the Olympians. Upon its release, God of War saw near unanimous praise for its simple but compelling story, the DMC-inspired hack-and-slash combat, as well as the incredibly brutal and over-the-top gore, leading it to be nominated for several awards and sell 4.62 million copies, making it the 13th best-selling PS2 game, with it proceeding to get multiple side games which detail Kratos' eventual distaste for the gods, and 2 numbered sequels with 2007's God of War 2 and 2010's God of War 3, which sees him declare war on Olympus and effectively massacre the entire Greek pantheon to get revenge on Zeus. After the release of 2013's God of War Ascension, and ignoring collections and remasters, the series would go on hiatus until 2018's God of War for the PlayStation 4, which served as a sort of soft reboot for the franchise, the events of all the previous games still being canon, but tells a more disconnected plot set 150 years after the events of God of War 3, it following Kratos now living in ancient Scandinavia, where after the death of his second wife, Faye, he travels alongside his son Atreus to fulfill her request of spreading her ashes at the highest peak of the 9 realms, along the way running into conflicts with the monsters and gods of Norse mythology, with the gameplay being completely reworked, dropping the fixed camera hack-and-slash style of the Greek games for a third-person over-the-shoulder perspective which is presented as one continuous shot. God of War 2018 would end up being the most positively received entry in the series amongst critics since the first game, garnering praise for its attempts at refreshing the series with the new gameplay and change in mythology, as well as the heavier emphasis on its story and writing, with a lot of attention being focused on the interactions and bond between Kratos and Atreus, it going on to sell a little over 21 million copies, making it the third best-selling PS4 game behind only GTA 5 and Marvel's Spider-Man, resulting in 2022 seeing the game come to PC, as well as the release of its own sequel, and by extension the fifth main entry in the series, God of War Ragnarok, for both the PS4 and 5, which would also later get both an epilogue that was released as free DLC titled Valhalla, and a PC port in 2024. The Norse games being generally viewed as just as good as the Greek games, even if they're borderline uncomparable given how different they can be from each other, with God of War easily standing as one of PlayStation's most popular and widely beloved franchises. As for the bots featured from the series, to jump ahead a bit, in order to match how the level is specifically themed to the most recent entry at the time of Astro Bot's release, Ragnarok, almost all of the VIP bots in the level are characters which originate from the Norse games, the only exception being the one you copy the power of, Dad of Boy, who's based on the series' main protagonist, Kratos. Originally a Spartan warrior, he sold his soul to Ares in exchange for protecting his men and providing the power needed to destroy his enemies, blindly doing his bidding until the day he tricked Kratos into slaughtering his wife and daughter in the hopes it would make him a stronger warrior, but instead led to Kratos breaking his oath, with his attempts to move past the event all being in vain, after being cursed to have their ashes permanently stain his skin and the gods retracting their promise they'd erase his memories of the event in exchange for doing their bidding, planting the seeds of disillusionment that would eventually lead to the downfall of not just Ares, but all of Mount Olympus at the hands of the new God of War. To match the theming, the bot's design is specifically based on his look in Ragnarok, complete with the item he gives Astro being his main weapon from the Norse games, the Leviathan Axe, which in both series can be used as a melee weapon, as well as thrown and summoned back to the user's hand, along with also being capable of freezing enemies in ice. Finally, within the crash site, the bot can be given the accessory well-stocked campfire, at which it will sit by and whittle wood, referencing the title screen and opening to Ragnarok, with attacking the bot prompting it to throw the axe at you, freezing the first thing it comes into contact with in a block of ice. In addition to Kratos, there's another bot he's paired alongside when he's introduced at the end of the Wako Taco boss fight, named Boy, who's modelled after Atreus, Kratos' son introduced in God of War 2018, who travels alongside him to fulfill Faye's final request. Their journey together not only strengthening the bond between the two, Kratos teaching him how to survive, whilst Atreus shows him how to open themselves to people that can help, but also leads to him learning his father's past as a god and his mother's as a Jotun, or giant, as well as the name his mother gave him upon his birth, Loki, with Ragnarok seeing him become one of the game's playable characters, in which he learns of his and Kratos' prophesized involvement in the cataclysmic event Ragnarok, along with gaining the power to transform into woodland animals. In the crash site, he can be given the accessory Boy's Bow, which is based on the Talon Bow, a bow made for Atreus by his mother from a yew tree so he could learn how to hunt, with it serving as the boy's main weapon across both 2018 and Ragnarok, with attacking the bot causing him to transform into his wolf form. For the first bot you actually save within the level, we have Ironwood Jotun, which is based on Angerboda, one of the last remaining giants in Jotunheim, who within Norse mythology is mentioned as the mother to 3 of Loki's children. After being hinted to in 2018, she made her proper on-screen debut in Ragnarok, meeting Atreus by the Ironwood after he found paintings she was making which depicted their first encounter before it happened, leading the way to show him a mural that foretold his journey in the previous game, as well as predicting his future, depicting his meeting with Angerboda and her handing over the souls of the giants, his battle with Heimdall, Kratos' death at the hands of Thor, and Atreus ultimately submitting to Odin, leading to his journey to try and avert the fate and save his father. When given its accessory, Jotun Shrine, it can be found painting another mural, depicting Atreus' wolf form surrounded by hearts, referencing both her relationship with him and how him seeing the mural triggered his first transformation into the wolf form, with attacking the bot causing it to panic and shoot out a series of paint explosions, which serve as her main method of attacking within the game. The next bot you find is Thunder Goddess, who's based on Thrud, the daughter of Thor and his second wife Sif, who ends up befriending Atreus when he travels to Asgard in the hopes of being able to prevent Ragnarok and Kratos' death, the pair working together to retrieve the pieces of an ancient mask said to provide whoever wears it with infinite knowledge. Her reason for doing so being that she believes it would help prove herself to her grandfather Odin, with her ultimate dream being to become a Valkyrie, mimicking her mythological counterpart, who was also named as a Valkyrie that served ale to the fallen warriors in Valhalla. The bot also comes with an accessory named Aesir Cleaver, which is based on her sword that was gifted to her by Thor, the bot posing and attacking with it in the crash site. After that, we've got Valkyrie Queen, who's based on Freya. Initially introduced towards the start of 2018 as the Witch of the Woods, over the course of the game, it's eventually revealed that she's not only a god, but the ex-wife of Odin and mother of the game's main antagonist, Balder, her helping assist Kratos and Atreus through their journey, giving information on how to clear the Black Breath mist blocking their path to the peak of Midgard, reviving the severed head of Mimir, and cures Atreus when he falls ill after an encounter with Mothi, with tensions rising between her and Kratos due to a mix of both his innate hatred of all gods after the events of the Greek games, and her belief that he'd only cause more damage the longer he kept his godhood a secret from his son. Within the crash site, she can be found next to her accessory, Tree-Topped Tortoise, which is based on Charlie, the large tortoise that lives above Freya's home, providing a place for her to stay in exchange for protection from the evils of Midgard's forest, with her also being seen playing with a pig, referencing Hidsvini, one of Freya's friends who was trapped in the form of a boar, with Kratos and Atreus' accidental hunting of him being the event that led to both parties' first encounter with each other. Finally, by attacking the bot, she'll transform into her eagle form, Falki. Following that, we have Thunder God, which is based on Thor, the Norse god of thunder who, after being mentioned throughout and making a small cameo appearance at the end of 2018, served as the secondary antagonist of Ragnarok, that sought to battle Kratos both as vengeance for the deaths of his sons, along with following the demands of his father, Odin, with him later having to put up with an uneasy alliance with Atreus when he came to Asgard and started working for Odin in the hopes of preventing Ragnarok. Tensions eventually rising due to the death of his half-brother Heimdall and his growing awareness of how little Odin cares for him or any of his family. The bot comes equipped with the accessory Legendary Hammer, which is based on the god's iconic weapon Mjolnir, one of the most powerful and feared weapons across all of Norse mythology, with the only thing that came close to matching it being Kratos' Leviathan axe, which was specifically designed to counter it. In the crash site, it can be found gesturing and charging up the hammer, with attacking them causing it to drop it and accidentally electrocute themselves. After that, we have the bot, or more accurately, the head of a bot, named Smartest Man Alive, which acts as a stand-in for Mimir, a Celtic fae who originally served as Odin's advisor until his paranoia that he'd been secretly helping the giants led him to imprison Mimir within an indestructible tree located at the top of the highest peak of Midgard, along with removing his bejeweled left eye to keep him from traveling to other realms, proceeding to torture him every day for the next 109 winters until Kratos and Atreus came upon him during the events of God of War 2018, where he offers to help guide the two to their destination in Jotunheim in exchange for freeing him from his prison, with the only method of doing so being to cut his head off and have it reanimated through old magic, which they were able to do with help help from Freya. The rest of the game seeing him help the two complete their journey with his almost infinite knowledge of the 9 realms. When given his accessory, Tome of Knowledge, he can be found falling asleep in the middle of reading a book, referencing his appearance during the opening of Ragnarok, with attacking him causing one of the candles to fall over, lighting his beard on fire. The last 2 bots you find are Dwarven Blacksmith and Dwarven Artisan, who are based on Brock and Sindri respectively, a pair of Dwarven craftsmen known as the Huldra brothers, who were responsible for crafting both Mjolnir and the Leviathan axe, the destruction of which caused by the former eventually led the two to go separate ways, with the pair helping to upgrade Kratos and Atreus' weapons throughout the events of both 2018 and Ragnarok, acting as the pair's main allies over the course of the Norse games, and eventually leading the two to reuniting and start working together again. Their general dynamic being that Brock is incredibly rude and filthy, while Sindri is well-mannered and misophobic. Both can be given accessories with the magical smithy and fabled workbench. Their respective animations of Brock smashing the table with an axe to get rid of a mouse and bashing it with a cut of meat, while Sindri attempts to clean the table while shooing the mouse and is left panicked when attacked, being reflective of their respective personalities. Whilst that may be in the final regular level, we still have a handful of challenge courses which each reward you with 1 VIP bot. First up to swing is Crumble Rumble 2, which gives you the bot Pro Golfer, which is meant to be a more general character to represent the Everybody's Golf series, also known as Hot Shots Golf in America, a lineup of golf games published by Sony whose first entry was developed by Camelot Software Planning and released in 1997 as an exclusive for the original PlayStation. The development team for the title being led by one Masashi Moramori, with a lot of the gameplay being inspired by his previous work on Enix's World Golf series. The game ended up being a massive hit, garnering critical acclaim, multiple awards, and managed to sell over 2.3 million copies, almost half of which came from Japan alone, it ranking as the country's 6th best-selling game of 1997, leading Moramori to leave Camelot and form a new development studio called Claphands, who over the span of 20 years, starting in 1999, would make another 6 mainline entries and multiple spin-offs. After 2019's Everybody's Golf VR, however, the series would go on hiatus, which was most likely brought about due to a decline in popularity and sales of the franchise, as well as the later closure of PlayStation's Japan studio, who had assisted development on every entry up to that point, with Claphands making their own spiritual successor to the series with 2021's Claphands Golf for Apple Arcade, which was brought to Nintendo Switch the following year under the new name Easy Come Easy Golf, as well as 2024's Ultimate Swing Golf for MetaQuest devices. The series wouldn't see a new entry until 2025's Everybody's Golf Hot Shots, which not only saw development duties shift over to a new studio called Hyde, but it was also published by Bandai Namco through a licensing deal with Sony, which led to the game not only launching on PS5, but also on PC and Nintendo Switch, with it overall getting a very mixed reaction. It seemingly being unlikely that the series will ever recapture its glory days during the PS1 and 2 era, but still stands as one of the bigger names within the golf game sphere. As mentioned earlier, the bot seemingly isn't based on any character in particular, and is dressed in the stereotypical wear of the series' female cast, consisting of a golf shirt, skirt, and visor, with their accessory unsurprisingly being a golf ball and club, referred to as the bunker buster and ball, then being found readying their swing to hit the ball, with attacks prompting them to launch the ball into the sky before conking them on the head. Meanwhile, in Retro Rampage 2, we've got another character pulled from a series we discussed in the previous episode, Capcom Street Fighter. Specifically, we have the bot Assured Rival, who's based on Ken, a character that was originally just a palette swap of Ryu who only existed to facilitate the game's multiplayer, though later games would not only alter Ken's moveset to generally give him a more flashy and aggressive style of play compared to Ryu's more defensive and fundamental moveset, but they would also expand more on his backstory, where compared to Ryu, who effectively dedicate his life to wandering the earth to find more opponents to challenge in combat in pursuit of perfecting his martial arts, Kain would end up putting his training to the side on multiple occasions to fulfill his needs as a family man, eventually meeting and marrying a girl named Eliza and having a son named Mel, though he's always willing to get back into the ring, especially if it's to have one more match with his rival and best friend. To match the previously discussed bot based on Ryu, the design is specifically based on Ken's look in the Street Fighter Alpha series, and by attacking the bot, it will perform the second most iconic special move from the series, the Shoryuken, with one extra feature being that when you've saved both Street Fighter bots, they'll actually be able to interact with one another, as Ken getting hit by the Hadouken will cause Ryu to perform his victory animation before the two grab and throw each other, and Ryu getting hit by the Shoryuken will lead to Ken doing his victory animation before the two fist bump each other, both of which are references to their special intros from Street Fighter Alpha 3 and 3 Third Strike respectively. To end things off, we have our final level type to go over with the Lost Void stages, these being obstacle courses that are themed to the face buttons of a PlayStation controller, the first bunch specifically being themed to the triangle button, which the people designing the original controller intended to represent the player's viewpoint, hence why it was often used for camera controls or options menus, with these levels similarly rewarding you with one VIP bod for completing them. The first two we'll be looking at are taken from the Resident Evil series, Capcom's iconic horror franchise that's often credited for helping popularize the survival horror subgenre. Now to jump ahead a bit, we'll be looking at the first game in the series at a later point, so for now I'm going to skip over a general history of the franchise and instead only discuss the specific entry these bots pay homage to, that being Resident Evil 2, which ended up seeing a fairly turbulent development cycle. The original game's director, Shinji Mikami, was moved to a producer role, and filling in the director's seat was then relative newcomer Hideki Kamiya, whose only previous credits was as a planner for both RE1 and a Ghosts and Goblins themed puzzle game, with the original version of the title, often referred to by fans as Resident Evil 1.5, getting completely scrapped 2/3 of the way through development due to Mikami's dissatisfaction with it. The final game would release in 1998 as an exclusive for the original PlayStation, where 2 months after the events of the first game, a new strand of the T-Virus, a bioorganic weapon created by the pharmaceutical company Umbrella, has leaked into an industrial Midwestern mountain community called Raccoon City, and turned almost all of its civilians into zombies, the player being given the option to play as either the rookie cop Leon or college student Claire, as they attempt to find a way out of the city, along the way uncovering the conspiracy that led to the virus outbreak, and by completing one character's A scenario, you unlock the B scenario for the other, where enemies defeated, puzzles solved, and obstacles created in the first run are carried over to the second. Resident Evil 2 would end up receiving critical acclaim for its horror atmosphere, replayability through the game's 4 different scenarios, and improvements to both the presentation and gameplay from the first entry, with it also becoming a sales juggernaut, managing to sell over 3 million copies in just 6 weeks. It easily standing as the most popular entry of Resident Evil's classic era, with it not only getting an updated DualShock version just a few months later, but the following years would also see ports for several other platforms, along with a full-blown remake in 2019 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC, along with later ports for PS5, Xbox Series, and Apple devices, as well as a cloud version for Nintendo Switch, which in addition to receiving similar critical acclaim, currently stands as the best-selling entry in the series with over 16.8 million copies sold. Given the immense popularity of both versions of RE2, it's not too surprising that Astro would feature bots based on the game's 2 lead protagonists. The first one, which you save from the level Cut and Grind, is Rookie Cop, who's based on Leon S. Kennedy, a new recruit for the Raccoon City Police Department whose first day on the job just so happened to be the same day as the T-Virus outbreak, with the main things unique to his campaign being that he starts his journey with a lighter, which is needed needed to complete certain puzzles, and he has several run-ins with Ada Wong, a spy that was sent to steal samples of Umbrella's newly created G-Virus for an unknown company. Leon has since gone on to become one of the most popular protagonists in the series, especially after his return as the main protagonist of Resident Evil 4, with him also fulfilling similar roles in both RE6 and, at the time of recording, the most recent entry in the series, Requiem. Within the crash site, he can be given the accessory Statue and Cop, consisting of a head bust it will look at with a puzzled expression and a skeleton bot dressed in a police uniform that's slowly inching towards him. And by attacking, you can knock over the statue, causing Leon and the zombie to panic to put it back in place. These being based on both the police zombies found within the first major area of the game, the Raccoon City police station, and the various puzzles within the station that require the use of medallions, either referencing a statue in the original game, by which placing a unicorn medallion provides you with the spade key, or one in the remake in which placing 3 medallions unlocks access to the station's secret exit. The other bot, named Motorcycle Enthusiast, can be found in the level Pumpkin Peril, and is based on the game's other lead, Claire Redfield, a college-aged girl who came to Raccoon City in the hopes of finding information on the whereabouts of her brother and one of the leads of the first game, Chris Redfield, after the events of the previous entry caused the pair to lose contact with one another. Her campaign seeing her start with a lockpick that allows her to open desks for additional items, and sees her run into and protect a young girl named Sherry that's on the run from a large monster, with it eventually being revealed that she's the daughter of William Birkin, the Umbrella scientist that created the G-Virus. While she has since appeared in various side games, the only other mainline entry to feature Claire as a main protagonist was Resident Evil Code Veronica, which initially released in 2000 as an exclusive for the Sega Dreamcast, with a later expanded version titled Code Veronica X getting ports for both the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube. This bot comes with the accessory Symbolic Door, which is based on the various doors throughout the police station themed to card suits that require a matching key to open. The one featured specifically being the Heart Door, which is found in the East Office and leads to the basement and night duty room. The bot stands in front of the door attempting to open it with the club, spade, and diamond keys, unaware that the heart key is on the ground behind them. The other 2 bots you save from these levels are taken from Persona, a line of RPGs made by Atlus which are part of the greater Megami Tensei franchise that's been going since 1987. This particular sub-series coming about following the positive reception of 1994's Shin Megami Tensei If, for both its high school setting and Guardian system, where spirits can come to the aid of the human party members, with them receiving a new one anytime they die. This would lead to them taking and building on these 2 ideas to make what would end up being 1996's Megami Ibunroku Persona, which not only released as an exclusive 4 and served as the series' debut on PlayStation, but was also the first Megami Tensei game to release in America, under the new title of Revelations Persona. The game following a group of high school students that are gifted the ability to summon personas, ghost-like entities that act as manifestations of their user's psyche, by an entity called Philemon, the group utilizing his guidance and their new powers to combat supernatural threats brought about by a machine created by an energy company called Sebek. The game did very well in Japan, and whilst not a mainstream hit internationally by any means, was regarded as a sleeper hit for the PlayStation and garnered a cult audience that helped to establish the series in America, eventually building the momentum that would not only lead to the series eventually coming to Europe, starting with 2003's Shin Megami Tensei 3, but also helped Atlus become one of the bigger names in the RPG scene, eventually leading to them being bought by Sega in 2013, with Persona not only getting multiple sequels and spin-offs, but owing to its lower skill floor, contemporary setting, character-driven narratives, and more general familiarity with Western audiences, it's actually become more popular than the mainline Megami Tensei games. It being estimated that out of the roughly 40 million copies sold across all Mega 10 games, about 28 million of those sales came from just Persona, with Sega even going as far as to consider Persona alone to be one of their core franchises, alongside both Sonic the Hedgehog and Yakuza/Like a Dragon. Naturally, given that level of popularity, and the fact that nearly every mainline Persona game initially released as a PlayStation exclusive, Astro Bot features a handful of characters from the series. The first of whom, which you save in Fragile Frenzy, comes from Persona 3, which initially released in 2006 on the PlayStation 2. This particular entry following a group of students called the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, or SEAS, that have banded together to investigate a temporal anomaly referred to as the Dark Hour, during which the high school they attend is transformed into a tower called Tartarus, which is filled with various monsters referred to as shadows, with its themes mainly revolving around the concept and acceptance of death, with this entry later seeing an expanded re-release in 2007 titled Persona 3 Fez, a handheld conversion called Persona 3 Portable which came out in 2009 as a PSP exclusive and has since been ported to all major platforms, as well as a full-blown remake with 2024's Persona 3 Reload, which came out on PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and PC, along with a Switch 2 port the following year. As for who was pulled from this entry, we have Protective Android, which serves as a stand-in for Aegis, one of the game's party members that joins the group in July and is a robot, specifically a 7th generation anti-shadow suppression weapon created by the Kurushi group, who's made a member of SEAS and enrolled in the group's high school to serve as the main protagonist's bodyguard, and over the course of the game's story and her social link, gradually awakens to the concept of human emotion and struggles to deal with the idea that she may never truly be human and that she'll inevitably outlive those she's grown to care for and love, with Aegis also serving as the main protagonist of The Answer, an epilogue to Persona 3's story featured in both Fez as well as the DLC for Reload. After being given her accessory, After School Armband, which is the same one worn by the members of SEAS, she can be found tightening her bow and spinning her arm guns, with attacking her causing her to perform her Persona attack animation before overheating, referencing her exclusive ability, Orgia Mode, which gives her a large attack boost and provides immunity to status ailments at the cost of the player losing control of what attack she performs, and after a few turns she'll overheat, lowering her defense and rendering her unable to do anything for 3 turns, with attacking the bot a second time reverting them back to her normal mode. And to end things off, Dashing Dillo pulled its VIP bot from the next mainline entry, 2008's Persona 4, which was also a PS2 exclusive. This one seeing the main protagonist move to the countryside town of Inaba for a year, where he and his classmates attempt to find a killer in town associated with the Midnight Channel, an alternate world connected by televisions which portrays distorted and exaggerated versions of the townspeople after they appear on TV, with anyone who gets trapped inside that either can't see the truth or escape before the fog lifts is murdered by the shadows within and found dead hanging from a telephone wire. The group exploring the world to both save future potential victims and figure out who the killer is, with each party member being forced to confront their shadow self, a heavy exaggeration of what the respective person views as their negative traits that they wish to keep hidden, and accept them as a part of themselves in order to gain the ability to use a persona, with this game later seeing an expanded version titled Persona 4 Golden, which originally released in 2012 as an exclusive for the PlayStation Vita, and has since been ported across all modern platforms, with a remake named Persona 4 Revival currently being in development, and has been confirmed for release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. The bot taken from this game is Adorable Shadow, who's based on Teddy, a friendly shadow that takes the appearance of a mascot bear costume that the group meets when they first enter the Midnight Channel, providing them with glasses that allow them to see through the area's fog, along with taking a support role for the party until he manages to gain access to his persona after defeating his shadow self, a reflection of how Teddy's attempts to be a cute and cuddly mascot fall completely flat due to his existence as a shadow, resulting in him having a hollow personality, as well as his fears that he doesn't have any reason to exist, with Teddy also fittingly being the mascot of Persona 4. When given his accessory, Paranormal TV, the bot can be seen worriedly looking at and banging on a telly, displaying an image of static on a yellow background, with attacking the bot causing it to fall into it head first before struggling to get back out, with the image on the screen changing to a white ring pattern on a black background. This being a direct nod to how the Midnight Channel appears on TVs throughout the game, even down to the noises it makes, with the actual design of the TV being based on the ones that appear within the opening movie and the stack of TVs Teddy provides to help the party return to the regular world. And with that, we've covered all the VIP bots that can be saved within the second world of Astro Bot. And I hope if you enjoyed this video, you'll come back when we look at the third world, Serpent Starway. Until then, please provide any feedback on the series, and until next time, thanks for watching.